Let's take a call from, well, this is a follow-up call from Rao. Oh, I'm going to need that mouse back right now. Thank you. All right, Rao, he, him in Wyoming. And Rao, I remember this call. He said,
RAO.
RAO.
You remember the call, but you forgot the name.
Look, I'm just reading what's in front of me, Ron Burgundy style, okay? Oh. It says, Johnny asked me to find an experiment verifying simulation theory, and RAO thinks that he figured it out. Go ahead, lay it on me. What is it?
Well, I actually think it's really convenient that I just got my phone turned back on yesterday, and we got student Dr. Ben in the house to kind of come at the medical side from a spot where I'm going to be a dumbass and have some more professionalism going on there.
God is great.
But I was trying to figure out an experiment that didn't involve perfect spheres and a vacuum moving at the speed of light. And what I figured out was I think there might be some connection to fibromyalgia and the simulation hypothesis.
I'm very curious right now.
You're talking Ben's.
Okay,
You're talking Ben's magic stuff here.
As far as we can tell, fibromyalgia is pain without a source. Is that fairly accurate?
It's very complicated because we know a little bit about fibromyalgia, but we don't know a lot. It's continually being studied, and we do know that it's related to, obviously, it's neuropathic pain. It used to be a diagnosis of exclusion, but now it's odd because you have certain criteria of pain in at least 14 places, but you also still have to rule out everything else first. So it's still a diagnosis of exclusion, but we know more than we did know about it. We know certain things that help it now, which is kind of helping us figure out the mechanism. But I don't know if we can... I know that was what it was called, like that it was pain without a source. I don't know if that's still accurate.
Right, and like I said, I've got a very loose understanding of it, so that's why I want to come to you with questions when I don't understand something instead of making an assertion and making just an ass of me instead of assuming something. But my thought was, because I was experiencing something that I would think would be close to fibromyalgia, but I'm broke and I live in America, so I can't see a doctor about it. And I was wondering if I could set up a set of survey questions regarding the simulation hypothesis. And then we take a control group that hasn't been diagnosed with fibromyalgia and the experiment group that has been diagnosed with fibromyalgia. We have them fill out these survey questions, and I think I could determine who has fibromyalgia based on how they answer simulation hypothesis questions.
How would you format these questions?
It would be, I would try to stay away from physical symptoms and more along the lines of probably on a scale from 1 to 5, how confident are you that we live in a simulation? Do you often feel like distant, or it would be probably a lot of psychology questions that I've gathered from other people in the simulation hypothesis community about how we react, and see if people with fibromyalgia have a strong connection to those same feelings that people would. Oh, go ahead.
I'm failing to see how a subjective survey, which, I mean, surveys aren't super accurate in general anyway, because it's the person's perceived experience, like of what they think is going on with themselves. And oftentimes we are not the best judge of what is actually going on with us. So I get that you would do the survey and you'd get responses of people saying whether or not they agree with these simulation theory topics. But how would that prove a connection? Because you can, like, especially if you're suggesting to somebody that like these simulation theory questions are there. Like if I asked you and you have either a yes or no, do you think this is a thing? Like they have to pick one of two. So not even having room for nuance, there were such black and white answers. How does that then relate to, like, does the number of people that happen to share a common perception, does that necessitate that this is actually a link?
Well, the first one was that I wanted to work it on a gradient scale, like a 1 to 5, 1 to 10 scale, something along those lines. So it wasn't necessarily a black or white thing so that people could have more room than a yes or no answer. Because I understand that when you get stuck into that yes or no, that it can give you a false result because you don't necessarily feel it is, but you don't necessarily feel it isn't. So, but just with that, and if it would help, it could be like a guided survey where a mental health professional could kind of get rid of any bias that the person would have as an individual.
Well, that's my other question too with variables. How are we controlling for other variables? Because I know you're targeting specific groups with fibromyalgia, but if you're putting people in groups as, do you have fibromyalgia or do you not, the problem is then other conditions that could be related, such as if somebody had complex regional pain syndrome, where if you have a traumatic event and then you get nerve damage essentially just related to that. If you have people with that, they're technically a no for fibromyalgia, right? But so then they would be in the no fibromyalgia group and still have maybe a similar experience. So do you think variables like that would confound your data?
I think that's why sample sizes are like orgies. The more, the better.
Okay, how would you control other than sample size? Because sample size is great. That's a great thing to control for. But how else would you control for, like, what other variables can you think of that might skew these numbers?
Most of the variables that I can think of are mental health conditions that would skew the numbers of people who like people who heard about the people who get sick from every time they hear about something on the news, and then they would hear something about the simulation hypothesis and automatically be convinced because they heard about it. Something like that would skew the results. Yes.
Okay. I'll tell you what, RAO, this sounds like something that you might want to bounce back and forth through like an email. I think experimental design is something that's harder to talk through. You've gotten some ideas. Ben's given you some thoughts. Maybe shoot an email. Just going to wear that email out today. Why don't you go ahead and shoot an email over to tv@atheist-community.org, orgy, if you wish. And maybe you can brainstorm. But I do appreciate you calling in. Calling in again. Let's keep this going. It's kind of fun.